Checkity 1 2 1 2.
All righty. Well, hello, Mac Powell. How you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks so much
Awesome.
for asking and for having me.
Yeah, well, welcome to the Popcorn Space. I not only have a short time with you, so I want to get right into these questions. But first, I want to bring up something that you might not know. And I kind of grew up listening to your music.
Oh, cool.
And a few friends of mine used to make, so you know about the Chuck Norris jokes, basically?
Of course, yeah.
So we made those kind of about you.
Oh, awesome. Can I hear one?
Well, okay, so I used to make these YouTube videos all the time, and I wrote one called the Mac Powell Hotline. And it was making 911 obsolete because theoretically you could solve any problem if Mac Powell would make the lowest note he possibly could.
It's not as low as you think.
Right. Well, we had all these different scenarios where someone would be like choking on something, and they'd call you, and you'd be like, "Okay, I want you to make a low note, and I'm going to harmonize with you."
I gotta go. I'll go check that on YouTube.
Oh yeah. I'll give you a link to it. I wrote a whole 3-chorus song in like 7th grade called "I'm Going Up a Hill," which was basically me impersonating you, singing about this guy who walked up a hill, got bored, and left. But it's saying like this mantra to all these people who have ever wanted to go up hills.
Is it a song that I'll hear and then actually maybe want to record?
I would be shocked. It would blow me away. I can actually let me ask you a question. I can pull up a little piece of it real quick. So the first question I want to get into is I write short films. Okay, so I've noticed as I started writing, I've kind of developed this sixth sense when I'm going day to day. When I see anything interesting happen,
see dead people.
Right. No, but when I see anything interesting happen, it's kind of like in the back of my head subconsciously. I'll be like, that could be a story. I could write that down.
I do the same thing with songs. If somebody says something and it just kind of stands out, I go, ooh, write that down. You know, that could be a song.
Right.
The other day, Jason Horde, who's my right-hand man with my new band, my new project, he said something to and I've got it written down, but it was something to the effect of, somebody's going to get nervous. And I went, ooh, that sounds good. Let me write that down. So maybe one day you'll hear it on the radio.
Somebody's going to get nervous. Cool. Yeah, I'll have sometimes when I wake up in the middle of the night, and now they have that like talk to text thing.
Yeah.
And so I'll try to use that for notes. I need to stop and go back to writing down because Siri never hears me the correct way, and also I don't make any sense anyways.
Yeah.
So then I'll try to read them later.
If you're like me and you have a pretty thick Southern accent, which you don't,
right?
It's really bad. Siri has no idea.
Yeah.
Siri needs a Southern translator.
Yes, exactly. Another thing I want to get into is this transition from. So I know you from Third Day, and I think of Mac Powell as rock, and you're going into country, and I know that you've done kind of country stuff before, and so I wonder if like country is kind of your first love, or because I've heard about Nuclear Hoedown, and which I would assume is country music.
No, you assumed wrong.
Oh, really?
Yeah, Nuclear Hoedown was the very first. Well, it was the first band that I was in with Mark Lee, who the two of us started Third Day. I was singing when we were in high school. I was singing at a senior assembly. It was at the beginning of our senior year, and I knew him, but we weren't like close buds. We were both in a marching band together. Yeah, and I sang, and he came up, and I knew he was in a band. Had some other guys in the marching band were in this garage band together, but I never saw him or anything like that. And he heard me sing, and he came up to me and said, "Hey, man, why don't you join my band?" And I'm like, well, I don't play guitar. And he says, no, dummy, I mean for you to sing. And I went, oh, okay, yeah, I can do that.
So he started Nuclear Hoedown.
Yeah, so I said, what's the name of the band? And he said, Nuclear Hoedown. I went, okay, absolutely, yes, I have to be in that band.
Yeah.
So that's when we first started playing music together, and then that we kind of broke off of that to start Third Day.
Okay, cool. So did it sound any similar to Third Day at all?
Yeah, it was, no, we were actually trying to be just like a heavy rock band. You know, we were doing covers from Led Zeppelin to the Black Crowes, so it had some Southern influences on it, but it definitely wasn't country. And but that's, you asked about that. I think for me, like most people, when I ask my friends, what do you listen to? Everybody says, oh, I listen to a little bit of everything. Even though we don't really. We say that.
Right.
And I grew up listening to, I was really influenced by my parents' record collection. They had a really extensive record collection. And the main reason for that, and this is a little rabbit trail, is because my dad was in the Army, and when I was little, we were in Taiwan, and you could get records for like 5 cents or something. So there were all these bootleg copies.
Oh, that's great.
So we had a ton of records, and so I listened to a lot of those when I was a kid. But as I was growing up, kind of elementary school, early middle school, I was a big pop music fan. I was pop radio was like my thing, and then so I wasn't like a rock fan then.
Yeah.
And country music was growing up in the South. You just always heard it. So there were big influences on me in the country world, like especially Alabama, like the band Alabama. I'm from Alabama, so you legally you had to listen to Alabama,
Right.
And just there was Kenny Rogers and Ronnie Millsap and all these great singer songwriters. So I wouldn't have ever considered myself a country fan, but I knew it.
Right.
You were just around it. So it was almost like it was part of pop radios because back then, these days when you hear something like Florida Georgia Line on pop radio, that's like a big deal. You go, or even Taylor Swift years ago, not so much now that she's a pop artist now, but now it's like a big deal when you hear a country artist on pop radio. Like they're breaking out. But back when I was a kid, back in the 80s, early 80s especially, and the late 70s, there was country music on pop radio all the time.
Right.
So anyway, I digress, but it's a bunch of rabbit trails for you. But that goes back to your question. I had a bunch of influences, and country music was always a part of it, but rock was as well, and so was pop. And that's what I like to do is kind of mix it all together.
Well, I've noticed, growing up in Abilene, that a lot of country music would appear and kind of like be shuffled in with pop radio and stuff like that.
Okay, all right, good. Yeah, it's not so much in Atlanta.
Right. Okay, cool. Well, the next thing I want to get into is songwriting. So did you write all the songs or most of the songs for Third Day?
Yeah, I would say not all, but an overwhelming majority of the songs. We had this curse that every once in a while when we wanted to record a song that we didn't write, and it was rare that we wanted to because we just considered ourselves like we want to write our music. And Nashville and everybody wants you to try to find the best songs. Whether you write them or somebody else writes them. And so even if you write a bunch of great songs, they're still looking for the better song.
Right.
And so people were always trying to push us to get other people's songs, but we didn't want to. I always thought even if it's a hit, if I didn't write it, I don't want to, it's not us. But however, every once in a while we would see something or hear something that we'd go, man, I want to record that. Like we were doing for the Offerings record. There was a song called "You Are So Good to Me," and I'd heard it in church one time, and I went, "That's an amazing song. I want to record that." And it's funny because when we went and recorded, I'd only heard it like once or twice, and you got to remember this is before the internet, so so I couldn't look up the words or whatever. I just tried to remember it, and I actually recorded some of the lyrics wrong.
That's pretty funny.
So,
but even when you didn't write your songs, you wrote your songs.
Well, yeah, exactly by accident. But also, whenever we recorded something that we didn't write, it ended up being, we had the curse, it's a blessing and a curse, it ended up being a big hit. So we did a song, Michael W. Smith asked us one time to be part of this worship project that he was putting together called Exodus. And we said, man, if we do this, can we record Agnus Dei, which is the Hallelujah, that song. And he said, great, let's do it. He produced it, and it ended up being a big, huge hit, and we played it for our whole careers. And then Rich Mullins had done a song called Creed that we loved, and we did it at a Rich Mullins tribute thing, and it ended up being a hit. And it's like every time we did something we didn't write, ended up being a hit. It's like, oh, man, we didn't write this.
Did you ever get to meet Rich Mullins?
Oh, yeah. We spent quite a bit of time with him.
Oh, really?
Yeah. He was an amazing man. I miss him so much.
Man, he seems like it. My uncle got a chance to meet him on a plane. Like he got to sit next to him on a plane, which is like crazy. And I've just heard he's just one of the most interesting, just kind men that you could be around.
He was I learned a lot from Rich. He totally was not the person that I thought he was from his music. And God really taught me a lesson through that of not assuming.
What exactly do you mean by that?
Well, you hear these great spiritual lyrics and these just very strong theological ideas, and then you go and meet him and he smoked and he cussed like a sailor and he just was like this ragamuffin kind of guy. That he was not at all who you would think that he was. But at first I was disappointed in that, and I'd go, I can't believe this is the guy that I thought he was, know. And then I ended up liking him more because he wasn't who I thought he would be.
Were you ever near him when he wrote any songs? Or
no, not when he, as far as I know, not while he was writing songs, but we actually shared the stage quite a few times together. He tells a story that well, his A&R guy, a great guy, Don Donahue, we were at the same record company together, and I was just a huge Rich Mullins fan, and so to get to meet him was amazing. And then we'd invited him. I mean, I have a ton of stories. That'll be another day for another podcast. Like, we could do the Rich Mullins podcast, but I lost my train of thought. What were we saying?
We were
talking about. Oh, did you asked if I was around him when he was writing songs?
Right.
But we ended up we played on stage quite a bit. We do each other's songs, and he would come out and sing some of our songs, and we would cover his, and he'd sing along with us. So it was I didn't spend as much time as I'd hoped to with him, of course, but have some great those handful of times that we did get to hang out. They were great memories and some great stories that I can share one day later.
Yeah. I feel like I was one of the few people among my friends who, when Pitch Perfect came out and they were doing that Cup song, I was like, that's just like Screen Door on a Submarine.
That's right. How do you know that? You're too young to know that song.
Yeah, well, my dad grew up with all that.
Okay, so you were listening to stuff that you're
yeah.
Gotcha.
Well, I've got that, what was it? It was the Heaven Bound I was singing one time, and my one of my like teachers, who's kind of my mentors, was like, "How do you know Heaven Bound?"
It's true, yeah.
Which I thought was funny. But let's see. So as far as songwriting, I want to know. So I've been trying to figure out like what filmmaking means to me, and it's kind of like developing as I'm going with it. So as far as songwriting, like what does it mean for you and like for the audience you're creating it for?
Yeah. Well, that's a great question. I think there's probably several answers to that. I think for me, a huge part of songwriting is about the music. I've always got these tunes in my head. And people say they ask all the time, you know, what comes first, the lyric, and you know, it works in different ways at different times. But mostly for me, it comes from a melody. And I'm driving my family crazy because I'm constantly whistling melodies and you know, kind of trying to come up with these ideas.
Yeah.
Not even trying. It's just like it's this overflow. It's just ideas.
So you normally start a song with a melody before you get the lyrics.
Like normally it's like me finding this melody and just singing it over la 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 la. That's just something I'm making up. So then I'll go la 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 today, and I'll go, oh, today. Okay, what am I going to? And so I look at it as like a crossword puzzle. It's like I've got my 5 down is the word today, so I can use that to figure out what 7 across is. You know, something's got to fit with that.
Right.
And so that's how I look at songwriting a lot, is filling in those spaces. But there's that creative part that just like there's a little spark, and that spark is what you start with, and then it kind of grows from there. But you know, also, as I was saying earlier, there's somebody can say something. So there are times when it starts with just a line. Like somebody says something, you go, oh, that's funny, or man, that really, there's something about that. And I don't know, there's different ways of doing it, but usually it starts with a melody for me.
Right. Cool. And I kind of get that because a lot more of the feeling, I think, comes from the melody. Because you can write an upbeat song with really sad lyrics, and you can still, I mean, somebody listening to it in a different language or not paying attention to what it's saying can still get that good feeling. It's more about the melody.
Absolutely.
And so,
well, yeah. And I say that often is that, you know, how often do we really listen to, if we're listening to songs or even really music, but songs in general, how often do we listen to just an instrumental? Like most of the time we want there to be a vocal, we want there to be something that's being said to us, something that we can remember and sing back more than a melody. So lyrics are powerful and they're strong, but I feel like you could have a great lyric, but if the melody's not any good, it's like, who cares?
Yeah, it's important that they fit together and mesh well.
Yeah, absolutely. But I don't look at it, you know, and I may change my mind somewhere down the road, but I don't really look at it as a 50-50 thing. To me, the melody is like 75% of it. And that gets me in trouble sometimes because especially how can I say this nicely, in a humble way? I'm a pretty good singer. So sometimes if you're a pretty good singer, sometimes if you're a good singer, you can kind of fool the audience and yourself into going, well, this lyric's a good lyric. Well, it's not always. Sometimes it's more of the way you present it is better than the actual lyric. And so that gets me in trouble sometimes. I'll go back and listen to some things years later and go, man, I could have done a better job with that word or that line. And so I'm trying now, after doing this for many, many years now, that's what I'm trying to learn is like, don't just give up because it sounds good. But then I can also argue with myself, like we're doing a Tom Petty song called You Wreck Me. We're doing a cover of his on this tour. And it's hard for me to memorize the lyrics because he says a couple of lines, more than once in the song. And it's like, I can just envision him when he wrote this song. It felt great. It rocks. It sings well. And he has the lyrics written down and he didn't study it. He didn't go, what am I saying here? He's just like, this feels good.
Went for it, and felt it.
And I have no problem with that. I think it's great because most of the time you're not going to study, sit down and study the lyric. But when you have to learn it, you're going, oh man, I'm getting confused because you said this here and you said this here also. And so I'm trying to learn from that. Let me ask you a question. So for me, I'm also learning that there are times where I'll grab hold of that line or that word or something and I go, man, okay, I'm going to write a song about this based on this. This is the title. And then later on I'm going, well, is that really maybe that's just a line and maybe that's just a word in the song and there's something greater. Do you find that when you're writing stories where you go, man, great, this is what it's about. And then as you go to kind of produce it and put it together, you go, well, no, that's just a small part of a bigger picture.
Yeah, I think a story kind of becomes its own if you're telling it right. And so I'll come up with like Black Roses was the last short film I did. Okay. And the idea came from, it's a line from a Sylvia Plath poem, which is talking about jealousy, and it says, it can make black roses. And so I started creating it around that, but as I create the characters, and they kind of like almost become real people to me when I'm creating the story, and they start to do their own things, and I realize like maybe my original intention doesn't fit for them because they wouldn't do something like that. And the story becomes its own, and then it gets certainly bigger. And I get what you're saying. In certain cases, it's been kind of like that, where you come up with a title, you base it around a title, but then eventually the title almost like overstays its welcome, and it's like, well, if that title doesn't really fit the whole anymore. I need something new to get a better aspect of the story as a whole.
I love the creative process, and even with me being, I'm 46 years old. It's like I still feel like even with this new project that I have, Mac Powell and the Family Reunion, I'm starting over. It's just like beginning again with like I did with Third Day, and so I'm almost in the same way doing that as a writer. I'm not necessarily starting over. You're taking what you learned, but I want to continue to get better. I want to continue to grow and ask those questions.
Yeah, I was really excited. So I actually just had lunch downtown like a week or two ago, and I was walking down to the studio, and I saw on the marquee at the Paramount, it was like Mac Powell and the Family Reunion. I was like, is that the Mac Powell that I'm thinking of? I also wanted to mention when you were talking about it, like certain words, it kind of also depends on the way that you sing them. It reminds me of the big point that was kind of where the Chuck Norris jokes came from, that we were like making you epic mythology, came from the song Run to You, because beautiful song, beautiful chorus, but I think in the third chorus or something, you're just like so into it and words start to blend together.
Oh, yeah.
And it just like, we could only describe it as like a sound of epicness, because you were like, I mean, we were middle schoolers, but you were like, if I run to you, yeah, and just like went for it.
I'm making my own language up.
I know. We were like, it's perfect. And that's kind of where the character came from. Next thing I want to ask is, for you, what is the hardest part of having a profession in music, or maybe just as an artist in general?
Hardest part of having a profession in music. I think it was that there were so many voices speaking into what you're doing that you can't just. I think about. I really love art, like painters and paintings, and I try to go visit as many art museums as I can when I'm on the road, and that's such an individual, for the most part, an individual thing. I don't think anybody's going to Van Gogh and saying, you should paint this and you should do it this way and do that. Right. And no, that's crap. Go do it this way. Now, I just watched the At Eternity's Gate. What's it called? The new Van Gogh movie. Willem Dafoe's in, something like that.
Oh yeah, I can't remember the title, but I just saw
Eternity's Gate or something like that. Anyway, I just saw that, and Paul Gauguin, who he was friends with, they were painting beside each other, and he's like, "Well, you're doing this, and you should." So I guess that maybe he did get that, and people. But for the most part, when you're a painter, you do what you do, and as a songwriter or someone who records music, you've got, when you're a signed artist, you've got other guys playing with you. They're throwing in their 2 cents. You've got the producer, you've got the record company, you've got management. So you've got all these voices telling you what's good and what's bad, and what you should be doing, what you shouldn't be doing. So I think that's probably that's the first thing that comes to my mind as being the hardest part of it. But there are times when those voices speak into you, and you need to listen to them.
Yeah.
But I like being at a place now. One of the things that's easier about being a solo artist rather than being in a band is going, you know what, I'm just going to do what I want to.
Right.
And as an artist that's not on a record deal, independent artist, there's a lot of fun to that. It's scary because it's got to be great, and if it's not going to do well.
Yeah.
But it's also very freeing.
Well, I have some certain people in my life that when I write a first draft of a script, I'll go to, and I know, like, I have the guy who's going to give me some like good uplifting advice, and then I have the guy who's going to tear it apart. And the interesting thing I find from the guy who tears it apart is a lot of it will go. It'll kind of burn away the dead wood, but also there are some parts that he'll try to pick at that I'm like, no, it'll make me feel more solid in it because I start defending it, and I start to understand more why it's important and why I care about it to have to defend it in front of somebody. So I definitely think it's important. I mean, it does get sort of sad and frustrating because it's like a child basically. You're creating this thing for so long, and somebody comes through and 75% of it is crap to them, and you're like, oh man. So
there's a friend I was working with. I'm doing a video podcast, and I had this idea to interview people at Waffle House. So the first person I interviewed is Jeff Foxworthy. So we're sitting in Waffle House, and I'm asking questions, and so we've got the footage, but we're editing it. And so as I'm talking to, and you may know this term, the guy who's putting it all together, he said, when you're editing, and this is a horrible term, I'm sorry, but it's he says you're killing your baby,
right? Because
this is your child, as you said, and you're like slicing away at it, and you're cutting it away, and so that's really hard. I think for me, I've found out, kind of playing off of what you just said, that for music, and it took me a long time to figure this out. You can be in the studio and you can be high-fiving each other going, this is amazing, look how great we are, look how amazing this music is. And not until you play it for your friends do you really understand how you really feel about it. Because if I sit down with a few friends and I'm playing some music for them, and I go, well, just wait for the bridge. When you get to the bridge, then you're going to be sold. It's like, if I'm doing that, I'm already dead.
Yeah.
The song's not great.
Well, it was Vince Gilligan. I mean, people have said it before him, but Vince Gilligan, the guy who wrote Breaking Bad, he says it all the time. They have a Breaking Bad podcast, and he always says about these kind of ideas or story threads that he wanted to go with that he said. It's so fun. I don't know if you've ever seen him in an interview, Vince Gilligan, but Breaking Bad is quite dark, and he's just like the sweet, like Southern talking guy. He looks like he couldn't hurt a fly, and he'll talk about these like twisted ideas he had that the writing room was like, I think we're gonna go to jail if we put that story in Breaking Bad. But he'd say, I'd kind of fall in love with these ideas, and they explained to me how bad they are. And, the saying is you have to kill your darlings. And you have to get rid of some stuff because
that's a better way to put it than killing your babies.
Yeah. Well, because even if you fall in love with it, and maybe individually it is great, you have to worry about the project as a whole and what you're trying to do with that.
Yeah. I say often, I've said this from stage, that as a songwriter, these songs are your babies, and I have 5 kids, so I know what it's like to have babies.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to compare my songs to my, my children. Of course, I love my children much more, but there is something about taking that idea and just like your children, shaping them and trying to make them the best that they can, so that when they go out into the world, they're going to bring light and encourage people and bring love. And even if you got an ugly baby, you still love it.
Right.
And so I think that sometimes my songs or maybe your projects or whatever, they may not always be the best.
Well, it's funny,
but you still love it.
Yeah, it's funny because like sometimes you'll know it's got certain problems, and you could diss on it, and then one of your friends will say something about it, and you'll be like, hey. Don't be talking about it. Yeah. You just said it. It's like, right, but it's my kid.
Right.
You can't bring that up. Another question I have is, what was the most difficult thing you encountered in the Christian music industry specifically? And just to maybe prompt you and throw something in, because it's what I thought about earlier when you were talking, is a lot of people want you to do certain stuff. Were you pushed to perform a lot of the like more popular like worship songs? Because I don't think of Third Day as a worship band at all.
No, we weren't. No, we. If anything, it's an interesting question, because for us, when we did our first, we always felt like worship was a big part of who we were, because when we started out, we'd go play youth groups and worship was always a part of that. Yeah. So we would always bring that in. But it wasn't necessarily who we were. It was just part of who we were. And so when we wanted to do the Offerings record, which ended up being our biggest record ever, it was our third album, the record company didn't want us to do it. They were like, no, that's not who you guys are.
Yeah.
And we said, well, just let us do it. And, it won't even have to count against our record deal. Just let us do it. And we thought, man, at that time, our first record had sold about, 250,000 units, and it did really well. And the second record didn't do as well, and it was just kind of, that sophomore slump thing. And so with the third record, our third record was Time, and it did real well. It became a gold record.
That might be my favorite of Third Day.
Yeah,
it's hard to decide.
Yeah, I love that one too. That's one of my top 2 records. So the Time record did well, and that's where things kind of blew up. But when we did the Offerings record, which was our fourth album, that's what we wanted to do. We were like, we want to do this worship record. And this was, you got to remember, this was before there was worship stuff, but it wasn't known. It wasn't like on the radio, and it wasn't, people like CCM artists weren't necessarily doing that.
Right.
There were some, like Petra had done a worship record, but that was kind of another lifetime before us. And so anyway, it was kind of a gamble, but we really thought if we sell about 25,000 units of this, then that's just we were making it for our fans.
Yeah.
Because our fans were coming to the show, hearing the worship set, and going, man, you guys should do a record of this stuff. And we're like, okay, good idea. After people kept saying that a lot, we go, we'll do it.
Yeah.
We'll just throw it out there, and then we'll move on to our next real record,
That was the one that you said that you got like one of them like a little wrong because the internet thing, right?
You are so good at me, yeah. So that's kind of, so it's the opposite of what people would think. And even after that, our label never really, we did a worship record a few years ago called Lead Us Back, and the label really didn't want us to do it. I don't know. It's interesting because you would think that they would, but they never really pushed us that way.
Would you say that was one of the most, because I kind of led you in a certain direction for that question, but was there something else that you would consider the most difficult thing in the Christian music industry?
I would say,
because I don't know the specifics on it, but I know that like Switchfoot went through some weird stuff, so they ended up doing that, like starting their own company.
They definitely, we took them on their first tour they ever did. It was just 3-piece at the time, and Timmy, their bass player, was like, we were playing these little clubs. He wasn't even old enough to get in the club, but he's opened up for us. And so, but they specifically, even from young kids, they knew they wanted to do mainstream music. They're believers, but they wanted to do mainstream music. For us, it was the opposite. It was like we knew we wanted to do Christian music, and we would hope to get something in the mainstream. But overall, we were like, we're going to be pretty blatant about what we do. And so, if anything, I think that leads to the most difficult thing is that when you've got, and I'm dealing with it now, as with Mac Powell and the Family Reunion, I say the word country. I say this is country music, but some of it is, but the whole thing's not. That's just part of it.
And it's more secular, right?
Yeah, definitely more secular. And I say that because I put that title on it because I don't want people coming to a show or buying my record and going, wait, this isn't God of Wonders. This is not my Third Day that I love. And I want them to know this is not that. This is different. Now, I'll always do some of that. I'll do some Third Day stuff, and I'll And of course my faith is going to carry over into some of my music, but and I'm rambling, but that really goes back to your question, because that you had one of the hard things is that within Christian music you have to make Christian music. So if you make something that's not that, you just tell a story or whatever, it's not going to really fit. Doesn't fit in the show, doesn't fit on the record. So that's the hardest part, is that you have to kind of be in this box of, we got to write about this, and it's got to be in this way, and this is how it's got to be presented. And so we're doing stuff that's more country. You could just tell more stories. You know, you're able to kind of expand outside of that box a little bit. So,
and this is just kind of freestyle real quick. I want to ask you, what is something that you have never or don't really get asked in interviews that you would love to explain or get out there? Or is there anything you can think of?
I think...
Because I know people ask like a lot of the same cliche questions.
Yeah.
And I was just thinking, is there anything that you've been like, man, I really wish I could have an opportunity to just talk
No,
about this?
I don't really think about it in those terms, because I'm trying so much to answer the questions that are asked.
Right.
Because I really do love doing interviews. Most artists don't, but I do, because it actually, I consider it like I'm picturing I'm laying down on the couch and you're my shrink, I'm being able to kind of think out loud some of these thoughts and ideas.
Be able to dissect ideas,
right.
basically.
Because I don't necessarily sit around thinking about that stuff. I'm more like doing the work. And then later on, you look back on it and go, oh, okay, that's what that was about.
Yeah.
Or sometimes you make I always got so mad at the record company, because they're like, okay, what's the message of the record? And what is it we're going to tell people? What do you want to say through this record to people? I'm like, why can't we just make some good music? You know, why does it have to have a message? Why can't it be just some fun music people like to listen to? And if they like it, they like it. There doesn't need to be a T-shirt made about it.
Yeah.
And so that's back to your original. Well, that's the other one of the hard things. But that's picking on Christian music, but that's the same in any genre or any music.
Okay, cool. Let me see what I have right here. What is the greatest struggle, or the biggest struggle or triumph that has led to a powerful song for you? Which I hope is not too counterproductive to you saying just making.
No, I think I'll give you two examples, but they're not. It's not necessarily from your question, but it makes me think of it. It wasn't something a struggle for me per se. It was more of seeing a struggle in some other people. We have a song called "Cry Out to Jesus," and that song came from. There were some people that we kind of knew them, but not. We knew of them. They were friends of friends, and quite a few years ago, they had lost a child on Christmas Eve, and so me thinking about that, what that would be like, as a father, thinking about that pain and that burden, that kind of led to that song. It really was a song to encourage them through that struggle, through that hard time, and so that was. And then that song actually ended up being a big hit. And fast forward a few years later, this couple comes up to us after a show one time and said that told us the story of how their son was going to end his own life, and he had been dealing with addiction and dealing with struggling with life for many years. And so he drove off into these woods, and he was going to end his life, and he turns on the radio to have some music playing while he's ending his life, and he hears the song "Cry Out to Jesus," and that led him to God, to not end his life and to pray and ask God to save him. And so them telling us that story led to a song called "Miracle." I Need a Miracle. And so, those two songs are really tied in together from these struggles that people have had. It wasn't my struggle, but it was being able to hear those stories, and in turn, how that affected me to want to encourage people, and then it went on to encourage many more people. So,
well, it's almost like you're the musical strength then, because you're looking at something and you're being able to create. I mean, it's like it's such a form of relief, I think, music, to be able to take an emotion that we don't know how to properly verbalize and to be able to kind of throw it out there in music.
Yeah.
And it kind of becomes like a level higher than
Yeah.
verbal communication.
Yeah, and that's the way that not all artists are like this, but most of the time when I write, I'm not writing from something. For me, the emotion and the creativity is coming from the music itself. It's not like I've got this thing that's happening in my life, so therefore I got to write a song about it. For me, it's more of this love for music and this continual creativity that's in me, and that makes me want to write a song. And then when I'm writing a song, it's like, okay, well, what's that going to be about then?
Right.
And it's more of what I'm observing and seeing and wanting to help people with.
Well, I certainly feel like music is such a spiritual gift to be able to like have. Like it's definitely otherworldly to be
Absolutely.
able to like I don't know, when you think about on a previous podcast we had talked about singing and how like people at one point, when you think about how communication started and people could start talking to each other, and that's crazy that you could experience that, but then there was this level higher, which was singing, which seems so like unorthodox. It's the same as talking almost. You're just like, lifting your voice up and down, but it creates this whole new level and this whole new aspect.
And I told someone the other day is that, and this is not, once again, not to pick on Christian music, because I'm very thankful for it. It influenced my life, not only from a career standpoint, but even more important from a life standpoint.
Right.
And so I'm thankful for it. But I think so often when we, people who have been in Christian music, you hear these stories about people's lives being changed, and you hear these stories about, people not ending their lives and not having, making some major wrong decisions by hearing these songs that encourage them. But that happens in mainstream music as well. I've heard just as many stories where, like, I see a documentary about Pearl Jam, and a song has changed one of their fans' life.
Yeah.
And so I, as a person of faith and as a creative person, see that as God is working, that it doesn't have to specifically talk about spiritual things for someone to be moved by it and encouraged by it and their life changed by it. So that's why I'm thankful for that. Of course, we know it's spiritual, and other people don't realize that. But yeah, it's not just Christian music that's can be spiritual.
Well, I feel like that's
of God.
That's a thing that it's you say for people who don't know that it's spiritual. It's like it's so. It's such like a feeling beyond explanation that I think it's definitely proof for something else, because it's like I don't know, it's beyond any communication we have. So when you explain, it's like, okay, it's that feeling. I wrote a poem one time called God Is, and so the idea was I said, you say that you don't believe in God because you can't see him or feel him or hear him, and in the poem I say, yes you can, look, that's him. Like we talked about in psychology, how the fact that like that door is way over there, but when I look at it, it's coming into my sensory receptors and going into my brain, and now like that door is a part of me technically. It's like this connection between all things that we don't have this explanation for.
Right.
Yeah, and so music is like part of this transcendent feeling of humanity that I feel like is undeniable. That there's something way beyond what we understand.
Yeah, it's definitely it's a language that we say that loves the international language, but I think music's probably another international language. I feel like music, entertainment in general, because it's creative. Like I know the movies. There are movies that have changed my life and maybe not saved me, from a big decision like suicide or something like that.
Yeah.
But they've made me think about things in life. When I think about I remember seeing Spike Lee's Do the Right Thing when I was in high school, and I literally watched it, and it was late at night. It was like almost midnight when I got done, and I was so affected by it, I watched it again right away. And it makes you, a movie like that makes you think. It makes you kind of think about life and how you act towards others, and it makes you kind of look deep inside your heart and your mind and your spirit. My favorite movie of all time is To Kill a Mockingbird, of course, book as well. And that's something that when you see it, it just like it shocks your system and it makes you reevaluate life and how you look at things. So it's like I love entertainment. I love music and movies and TV, and there's so much junk that's in that stuff, but there's so much more redemptive qualities in those things, and it doesn't necessarily have to be, something that's straight from the Bible. It can be a truth that God has given us.
Well, as far as you were saying, Melody, before, I wanted to go back when you mentioned "Do the Right Thing." I think the biggest thing that brought up to me was how important simple things get overlooked all the time. Because my favorite line in that is just when the guy's sitting there and he goes, "Always do the right thing."
Yeah.
It's such a simple line. It's the title of the movie, but like out of the entire screenplay, that just like stuck out to me and meant something.
Yeah.
And I think it's interesting. We just kind of overlook simple things. So when we get it, it's refreshing. Like you were saying, just making good music. It's this simple thing that we overlook. And so it's kind of this like almost forgotten beauty. We can't let go of that. So we're about to wrap up here. I want to ask, I have everyone sign the table, and we were talking about how we had Mark Powell just yesterday sign the table. So you were saying you wanted to sign next to his?
Yeah, his signature looks so much like mine. It's kind of scary. His
Just
is
got an
much.
R.
He's got a better penmanship than me, but I'll get close. And so I'm going to go right underneath Mark Powell with Mac Powell.
All right, so this is really weird. I'm going to show it to you real quick. So this is from like 6th grade of me.
I love it.
That's both me. I didn't have any like wigs or goatees, so Mac Powell was just me in a hat.
Okay, there you go.
I
would never wear a Dodgers hat, ever.
Oh, wow. Oh, I don't even know if I should show it to you anymore. All right, here we go. You ready?
Yeah.
I'm going up a hill. Now I'm getting bored. I'm going down.
They were actually supposed to look at each other, but I messed it up, so they just both look off to the side. But it ended up looking more mysterious.
That's it? That's the song?
No, that's just a little clip I was showing to you.
Okay,
I don't want to. I'll give you a link to the whole song.
Right.
You can
Can't wait.
check it out.
That's one of the best Mac Powell impressions I've ever heard.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Dude, I practiced all the time. We're just going at it. I think it's funny. Like Chuck Norris jokes, me and my buddies would just make jokes about it all the time.
I love it.
But yeah, it was a pleasure having you on. I appreciate you.
Man, thanks for what you're doing. I really dig it.
Yeah, I appreciate you coming on. You had some really good talk, really interesting.
Well, hopefully
ideas.
You can edit this down and make me sound better.
Yeah. All the little pauses. You won't have any ums or anything.
Yeah. Oh, there's a ton of those, I'm sure.
Alrighty. Well, I appreciate you so much.
Thanks, man.
Hey guys, I want to thank you so much for listening to episode number 16 of the Popcorn Space Podcast with Mac Powell. I want to remind you we do this live every Saturday at youtube.com/popcornspace. And of course, this was our first episode that wasn't recorded live, just because the opportunity we got to interview Mac was on a Sunday, and we'd already done an interview for that weekend. But I want to throw out there that this was a great experience. I want to thank Mac again for coming to be on the podcast, but I throw this in the end here just because there were some links that we didn't get to that I kind of wanted to throw out there. For example, Mac is still on tour, and to look and see for tickets, and if he's coming to a city near you, you can go to MacPowellandthefamilyreunion.com, and I would highly advise it. Incredible experience. I mean, I know him from Third Day, and it was certainly different than a Third Day experience, but beautiful songs, and really the most intimate concert I've ever been a part of. It kind of just felt like we were all just hanging out. I guess that's the idea, is it's a family reunion, and between all the songs he kind of talked to us, and there was talking back. We were requesting songs, and he came out a little bit before intermission was over, just him and a guitar, and he was like, "Is there any old songs you'd like me to play?" And we threw some out there, and he just played it in this beautiful, nice little acoustic version of them, and it was really an altogether great experience. Afterwards, he came out and met everyone that wanted to stay to meet him, and signed some autographs and took some pictures, and just a great guy and a great experience. So if he's coming to a town near you, I would highly advise getting some tickets to it. So all of the video podcasts are available on youtube.com/popcornspace, this channel. And all of the previous audio podcasts are available on the iTunes podcast app, Spotify, SoundCloud, if you just search Popcorn Space Podcast, or on popcornspace.com/podcast. Alrighty, guys. Well, thank you so much, and we'll see you next time.